All right. You know what it is. You know who it is. We're back. I love saying that again.
Yeah.
We are back with another episode. Last week, my co-host was feeling a little bit ill. He was sick with
Yes, I
it.
was.
Ollied. He learned to
I
ollie.
was too I was too sick with it, so I taught myself how to ollie on top of it.
No, but he was actually ill. He
Yeah,
was-
I was legitimately ill.
yeah.
You could probably still hear I'm very congested still. We're
So
on the
didn't even
tail
have.
end. We're 90%.
We're getting there. Lots of stuff going on right now with both of us, and yeah, so we're here. Jerry's feeling better. Schedule's lined up. Let's get this episode rolling. Because of that, we had the topic for today. We're going to be talking about what happens when you're sick, what happens when you come off an injury, what happens when things just go wrong, right? And you might have a little bit of a layoff from training, you might have a little bit of a layoff from just normal schedule. And we want to talk about what to do, how to get around it, and realistically the mistakes that people make inside of this, I guess we'll call it this ordeal, right? Like when something does
Mhm.
go wrong, how we can kind of make it better and improve from there. So we'll get this started. We're gonna do a 30-minute AM tap. Again, the AM tap, as much talking as possible inside the 30 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
All right. And three, two, one, and go. All right. So getting sick, kind of falling off a schedule, right? Let's call it that, because I think this is something that's super important because I'm going through this, you're going through this, right? Because of travels for me, because of feeling sick for you. Sometimes you don't have everything you need in the training, right? And looking forward for me for the next month, we have, Ian's fight that got announced, so we're getting ready for that. And then we're going to be going back to the US, my homeland. I can't wait to come back to the
Mhm.
US. But you feeling sick and if you have worked out long enough, right? And you've worked out for an extended period of time, you're gonna fall into this. There's gonna be periods where you fall off track, you get sick, you lose, whatever it might be. It's gonna pull you in a direction that you're off that, right? And there's so many mistakes that people make when coming back to this because everything that me and Jerry talk about on a consistent basis is consistency, making sure you're keeping yourself, sustainable, make sure you're keeping this stuff moving in the right direction. And when you do fall off track, let's start here. Let's start with what happens, and let's kind of talk about what happens when you actually fall off track, right? I would consider it as you don't work out for a couple days, maybe you take a week off, maybe you don't have the equipment you need and your workouts aren't like the same as they've been. So these are all little ideas or I guess we can call them changes, right? That occur that would make us fall off of schedule, right? Now, one of the most important things to talk about when you do fall off schedule is how do I get back onto schedule and how quickly do I get back onto schedule, right? And I think the there's a lot of mistakes that people make in the getting back onto schedule part because they either rush, because they kind of just get right back into things and they don't respect their body. And this becomes like a perpetual thing. And this becomes a very vicious circle if you don't treat it the right way. Because again, Jerry, how many times have you done? I know I've fucking done it more times than I care to say, where you get hurt, you get sick, and you're like, oh wait, well I did this 2 weeks ago, so I should be able to do it today. And you end up either hurting yourself or you end up just not performing it and you get in your own head and you just end up putting yourself in a bad position overall with the training, right? So I think the place to start here is that conversation. You got hurt, you got sick, you have travels, whatever it might be. What are the kind of the first things? I'm going to let you start. What are some of the first things you think about when coming back into the fold of training?
I immediately, because I've fallen into that same pattern where I'm just like, yeah, I did this 2 weeks ago. I'll be fine. I immediately start thinking, don't do it again.
Mhm.
And because I am so competitive, I most of the time still end up doing it. Even though I know like you've needed some rest, you've had some time off, you were sick. Like as soon as get back to the gym, tomorrow's like going to be like a regular day again where I'm going to be able to actually work out. I'm going to walk into the gym and I know that I'm going to feel like I want to grab certain weight, but Coach Jerry in my head is going to have to train client Jerry in my head and say, start lighter, build up. So that's the first thing is I always try to like talk myself through it. Like, don't be afraid to scale. Don't be afraid to start with what feels comfortable. Treat it almost like when I come back from being off for a little bit, I kind of treat it almost like a deload week because you've had time off. You're not going to be able to have the same output.
Mhm.
And sometimes you might surprise yourself depending on what you took the time off for. Being sick is different, but let's say you had like a small injury, it's healed fully, you come back. Sometimes that time off, you'll surprise yourself and you end up doing really well and you feel great in the gym that day you get back. Oftentimes when you're sick, it's a little different. You come back and you still feel that sickness because you have to kind of get rid of that feeling. And then you end up getting back to where you were. But just knowing that if you need to scale, you can. And then another thing that I think of is if you're not at the same place, I know personally because I've been there before. But when I talk to clients, I let them know like, if you're not at the same place, you did not lose everything. You're just taking one step back from the sickness to just leap forward afterwards. It's not the end of the world if you don't end up being where you usually are.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people don't think about, it's you brought up a lot of good points there that I want to kind of touch on. And I think one of the things is that idea of like when someone's missing training and they come back, they didn't lose anything, right? And oftentimes, and this is something that people see, or at least I've seen, is like when you take that time to rest, you look and you feel a little bit better. Like you look a little bit bigger. Sometimes people take time off and they're like, oh, well, like I took time off and I haven't worked out, but I've looked like my arms look better, my legs look better, that type of thing. And it's like, well, you're recovering, right? And your body's actually able to kind of catch up and recover, and you start to feel a little bit better, which is a great thing. And on top of that, what was the other thing you said? It was
With strength gains, or was it like
Uh,
so I was basically saying that I have to coach myself to scale if I need to, and I know that I didn't lose everything. You're taking one step back to leap
yeah,
forward.
yeah. Okay. So like,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So the first part, obviously, which I just mentioned, then the second part is like with the conditioning, right? I think a lot of people, it's always funny to me to see people do the like they either get sick or they, whatever happens, some injury, and then their conditioning starts to kind of fall off a little bit, or they get that initial like, oh, like this just feels very hard, and they just think like more is better. I just have to go harder. I just have to go harder. I just have to. And this is where this cycle starts to come back to kind of bite us in the ass, where it's like, okay, people have training, right? They miss it for a couple weeks, and they're like, oh, I have to make up for what I just missed, right? And in reality, it's like, if we're being honest, like that stuff, it's done, right? Like we missed it.
Mhm.
It's whatever. It sucks, but like we will catch up to it again. But we're not just taking that and then just moving into the next progression, right? That'd be like just skipping something. So one of the things that we have to realize is as we kind of get back into the swing of things, we want to make sure that we're A, smart about the weights and the things that we choose, and B, with conditioning, that we're not making up for anything, right? We don't want to be making up for things or making up for conditioning or making up for, workouts that we have missed in the last couple of weeks. The idea here is to just kind of get back, get into the gym, and just get moving again, right? And one of the other things that you mentioned was you don't you, like too many people I see come in and they're like, okay, I should just expect that if I lifted this 2 weeks ago, I'm just gonna be able to kind of get back into the gym and get into it, right? The biggest thing that I want people to kind of take away from this today is that if you're sick, if you're injured, if you've been off of fitness for a decent amount of time, don't be afraid to just start a little bit slower, right? And start a little bit in lower weight, lower the conditioning levels, whatever it might be, because the worst thing to happen here is to kind of like I mentioned, get into this loop where it's like, okay, I'm hurt, right? And let's go because this is one of the things you mentioned as well is like there's a difference from when you're sick and there's a difference from when you're injured, right? And there's also a difference from, if you've just kind of fallen out in regards to like schedule, right? It might just be something that um haven't found time for, which this is a conversation for another time, right? But let's say
Yes.
you just haven't made time for it and whatever, and you've been out of the gym. Those three are completely different scenarios on how you're going to approach yourself back into the gym. So let's kind of actually let's navigate this a little bit better for the people listening. Let's go from start with sickness, then we'll go from like just scheduling, and then we'll go into injury, right? So sickness, if you're sick, there's literally nothing you can do, right? I mean, like there is nothing you can do except for rest and let your body recuperate and recover. Personally, right? I think movement can help, but you have to be careful with the amount of movement. Obviously, I've done workouts where I've literally caused myself to get the flu. I've had workouts where like it's just bizarre. Like I was feeling bad. I did the workout and then I literally like got the flu the next day because I just pushed myself to the point where I shouldn't have, right?
I'm not gonna lie.
It
I think that played a role into why I got sick.
might have.
Because I had to switch gyms, and when I got back into the gym, I did legs, and I when I did legs, dude, I did legs. I went hard, and then I got sick like the day after.
Yeah, well, obviously your immune system's compromised. Your body's kind of like going through a position where it's recovering. I remember the day that I did the workout, it was a CrossFit workout. I remember doing handstand push-ups. I woke up and I was like, oh, I kind of feel a little bit sick. And I was in the middle of a workout doing handstand push-ups, and I swear to God, I felt like the flu. Like it was the most bizarre experience of my life. I was like, one, two, flu. I was like, what the fuck? And I just like kind of felt it hit my body. I finished the workout and then I didn't move for 3 days. Like I literally couldn't move for 3 days. My body was like, and everything that I had eaten or drank at any point was coming out of my body at rapid speeds. Let's just put it
It
that way.
vacated the premises. Okay. Yeah.
They vacated the premise. So when you're sick, the biggest thing I think, if you can, depending on how sick you are, obviously up to a certain level, you got to rest, right? But if there's like a sickness where it's like I got a stuffy nose, I got a something in my chest, like a headache, I'm a big believer if you can move in some capacity, walk, some low level aerobic stuff, maybe a lift of some kind, like a very low level lift. If you have the capabilities or you have the access to it, it's going to help. It's just going to help move things in the body, get the blood flowing, break a sweat. And I find like I've always found as you start to move in the direction of getting back into the gym, your body starts to naturally just heal, right? And working out and like this is the thing. When we look at training nowadays, the way that people train now is not for health purposes, right? There's a lot of people who train for performance purposes. And if we look at true health purposes for training, it's walking, a small lift, you know, we could talk about movement, a sport, something like that. Like that's truly for health purposes where we're not really breaking down the body, we're getting the heart pumping, we're getting the blood flowing, we're breaking a little bit of a sweat. That's for health reasons, right? When we look at today's training for a lot of people, say it powerlifting, high rocks, you know, triathlon training, just regular weightlifting, like we're doing damage to our bodies for the most part, right? In the grand scheme of things, we are healthier, but it can easily just take a little bit of a turn and we're off the rails going in the complete opposite direction. And I think that when we train, when we look at this stuff, we have to kind of take that into account. Healthy exercise, a walk, movement, a bike ride, whatever. That is what we want to see when we're sick, right? Let the body kind of move and don't just sit there because, you know, and I'm going to talk about this with injury as well. If you sit there, I think it's just one of the worst things you can do. I think it's just
Mhm.
very taxing on the body. You know, the movement helps the body kind of get stuff out through sweat, through, you know, whatever else it might do. It gets things moving. It gets, you know, like I said, you just feel better after you move if you do it in the right way. Now, what I don't mean by that is to, oh, I can move. I'm going to go do Murph. I'm going to do Fran. I'm going to go do a 1 rep max on a deadlift. I'm going to go, you know, balls to the wall for 20 seconds on an assault bike. It's like that stuff is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like a 10-minute on the bike, some stretches, you know, maybe you're doing stuff that feels good, that doesn't put any pressure on your head, farmer's carries, maybe you're doing like a light arm session, maybe you're just again doing yoga, whatever it might be, something that you know when you walk in and you walk out, you're going to feel better than when you walked in, right?
Mhm.
And I think with sick, hydration, right? If you're going to go sweat, make sure you're putting it back in, right? If you're going to go train, make sure you're eating. These little things are so important into getting back into the swing of things because if you're sick and you continue to train, then all that's going to happen is your body's just going to be compromised and either you're going to continue to stay sick for longer or your performance is going to go down, right? And or both, really, right? So the last thing we want to do is continue to train for an extended period of time while we're sick and then allow our body to continue to be sick, right? We want to get rid of that. So if we are sick, if you're feeling any type of way, don't be afraid to just dial back the training just a little bit, get a little bit extra sleep, hydrate a little bit more, and then continue that training in some capacity, but just be smart about the continuing of the training, right? Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so that when you are going back to training or when you are sick and you're trying to move, a good point that Brandon made was that I've done this myself is I've started to feel really good and like I'm maybe at like 80% and I have gone a little too hard and I knock myself back into sickness for like 3 or 4 more days. Like I've overdone it to that point. But again, I've also done it to the point where I learned from that and I went easier into the gym. And it honestly did boost recovery a ton. Kind of did that yesterday. I started to feel a little good and I had some energy. So I went outside and I moved around a little bit. And it honestly helped a lot. So
Think of it, it's like
just
momentum.
yeah.
As you keep things moving, you're going to continue to be able to move. If you sit still and you just let things, everybody knows the feeling of sitting on the couch all day, right? And
Hmm.
not moving. And I used to do this. I was actually having a conversation recently when when I was still living in New York, and you know this too, like Sunday was like grandparents' house day, right?
Hmm.
You go to your
Always, yeah.
grandparents' house, you eat chicken, pasta, whatever they're making for the day. And I would remember I would get there at like 11 and I wouldn't leave until like 8 or 9 and I would just lay there all day. And I remember I'd come
Hmm.
home, my head was pounding. I'd have like a massive headache. My body, I just feel bloated from eating so much chicken and pasta and whatever else my grandma made. And like I
All that
remember that
bread, dude.
feeling. Yeah, I
Oh.
remember that feeling of not it was fucking amazing. I'm not saying it wasn't amazing, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, when you do nothing for 10 hours except for sit there, watch soccer, watch TV, sleep, and don't move, you're not going to feel the best. So I think, that's just from my experience on those days where it's like you don't move, you feel headache, you feel like stiff, you feel kind of stagnant and stale, if that makes sense. But go ahead.
Hmm. That was exactly my next point is when you do sit down all day, those are the days where you're like, man, I'm so tired, but I didn't do anything today. And it's like, that's why you're tired. Your body thinks that you need to rest. So sometimes just moving a little bit will help you a ton. So
Mhm.
if you are feeling sick and you do start to kind of get a little better where it's not just like I'm dying, you're actually recovering, start to move, help that process, let your brain know, okay, now it's time to get back to normal. And it'll kind of kickstart that process a little more. Because if you are just sitting around, you don't get that extra blood flow. You don't get all those extra benefits to movement that we see. And then everything is just prolonged even further.
Yeah, and I think it's literally like we said in the beginning is you have to be cautious of not doing too much, right? And it's like it's such a fine line that you can cross, especially when you're sick. It's such a fine line of doing too much and actually being beneficial to yourself to recover and feel better, right? So if you have trouble with that or you kind of like struggle in any way, shape, or form, obviously like we're here to help and kind of navigate that for you. But just again, think of if you go into the gym and you feel a certain way, what would make you feel better that day? And just be honest with yourself. If it's a walk, if it's a stretch, whatever it is, as long as you know when you walk out of there, you're feeling better than when you walked in. And to me, like that means again, a good stretch, a good foam roll or something like that, whether you believe in foam rolling or not, a good foam roll always feels like good on the body. A walk on the treadmill, a sweat on the bike, whatever, an arm day. Like I said, arms are never going to really like tax anyone to the point that it's going to like destroy them. So that's a good way. That's another way for you guys to take away as well is like if you want a light workout, arms, work on arms.
Mhm.
So even if you push arms to the max, right? And you do like, I don't know, like you can even say like Rich Piana's the one. You remember the workout that where he did
Today
like
we're working out arms for 8 hours.
he has he has some
That
of
might give you the flu, but a
the
normal arm day would.
my friend Jocko loves Rich Piana. He always sends me like the memes that they make on Instagram of him where he's just like sitting there. And remember he had his like the what was it the 5% method?
I don't
He had like
remember.
a thing where you were supposed to eat like 8 meals a day.
Dude,
How did
he
you
had
know?
some wild things in general. I don't know if I
Uh,
remember that. If I saw it, I
he
would
died by
probably.
the way when he was like 42 from a heart attack. So he was like nuts, but he was actually he was one of I heard he was like a nice guy. But anyways, he had a workout where you did like 8 hours of arms. So it was like supposed to grow your arms an inch in one day. But, not to that extreme. But if you do arms in like a nice light fashion, it's something that you could do that'll help you move. So I don't know if there's anything to add to that on the end of the sickness day, right? Is there anything on your end?
No, not really. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Like if you can start moving and you can breathe normally, like I obviously move. If you are struggling breathing, maybe cut back a little
Yeah,
bit.
just don't take away from yourself, right? Like just don't take away from the healing process. Just give yourself that momentum, right? It's almost like just give yourself a little push and then back off,
Hmm.
right? Whereas like, even if you think about it like this, right? If you go into an actual workout, right? You wake up, you're sluggish, you do your warm up, and then you do your actual workout. After the warm up is when you kind of should be feeling that, all right, we're good. Like let's go get a workout. When you're sick,
Hmm.
that's a great place to stop, right? So do your little warm up, and then that's it. Let your body
Hmm.
get ready, and then just go home and recover. That's a great kind of way to put a bow on that topic and then move on to the next. So I think for sickness,
What what
that
do you would
little
call that?
what?
What's a good name for that? Is that like fitness foreplay?
Yeah, I guess fitness foreplay.
It's a little strip tease of your workout
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess we could call it fitness foreplay.
I don't know if that's gonna stick.
We'll have to come up with another name for it.
We'll find a better, more suiting name for that one.
Yeah, but for now, it's gonna be called fitness foreplay.
Call it FF for the
Yeah,
younger audience.
yeah, yeah.
FF.
So sickness. We'll tie it there. We'll come back and we'll summarize. But next, I think is an easier one. I think to me is well to a certain extent. I think this is the easiest because it has nothing to do with your actual physical limitations, right? It's your schedule. And I think that when we start to kind of look at someone who either hasn't been in the gym for a while or even a couple weeks, whatever it is, due to schedule, I think the biggest thing is to first, before the gym even comes into play, is where does it fit in, right? How do we make it fit in to the schedule? And I think that the biggest thing here is understanding one, the time that you've been out of it, right? If it's been years, right? Then you kind of go back into just like we I would treat it as if you just started in the gym again, realistically, right? If it's been months, then it's like, okay, well, like where were we, right? Like, were you an avid fitness goer? Were you someone who just kind of like went 2 or 3 times a week? Are you someone who went like once or twice a week? Like, who were you as a gym goer before? And then obviously the last person would be someone who's like, okay, it's been days or weeks since I've been to the gym because of schedule. If it's days and weeks, maybe it's just a travel, maybe it's just, whatever that you've kind of lost it. But if it's weeks, right, and you're starting to feel like, hey, I just can't find a grip on the gym schedule, first first things first is what is the minimum amount that we need to do, right? What is the minimum amount that we need to go in and do for a gym session? And I think that too many people get caught up in the process of like, okay, I've been out of the gym. I don't know exactly what to do coming back into the gym. So I'm just gonna do everything, right? And they try to, like we kind of talked about, they try to win, fitness in a day. And they're like, all right, well, I'm gonna beat it today. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, good luck, right? But I think one of the biggest things for someone who's losing it from schedule is to literally sit down and just be like, okay, where does this actually fit in my life? Between kids, if you're single, it's a different story. But how do I make sure to find time to go do a workout, right? Because that's usually the biggest thing and the only thing that gets in the way of it, right? If you are losing schedule and then you're trying to make a commitment to yourself to say I'm going 7 days this week, it might work, right? But for someone, and this one I don't think we need to spend too long on because like this is a pretty general one. It's like there's no physical injuries or limitations. You're not sick. It's literally just how do we make time to actually get inside the gym. So I think the game plan of attack here is finding days and times, whether it's 20 minutes, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's an hour, to fit that in, right? And I think with any habit, if you've lost it, if it's something that you used to do and lost it for an extended period of time, I think this is something where we try to get in fitness as much as we can for those 2 or 3 weeks. And what I mean by that is not killing yourself going 110 miles an hour on your workouts. It's smaller doses of workouts throughout the weeks that help you kind of build that capacity back up and just build the habit of like, okay, I'm working out, I'm working out, I'm working out, I'm working out. And you can kind of take the same game plan as well as being sick to the point where it's like, just feel good, right? Because I think most people who struggle with actually getting back into the gym schedule wise is, again, it's a different type of kind of perpetual cycle, but it's this cycle of like, okay, I used to work out, I used to do this. I'm gonna go to the gym and I'm gonna go hard because that's what I think I'm supposed to do. All right, now I can't move for 3 or 4 days. Oh, now I'm gonna go do the same thing because I couldn't move for 3 or 4 days. And now I can't move for 3 days. And you just kind of go into this thing until you either get hurt or you burn out and then you can't fit it into your schedule, right? So I think for someone who's fallen out due to schedule or due to time or whatever, I think that it's really important that you just find what makes you feel good and do that consistently as much as possible. And I always tell people this because I think a lot of the times with schedule, right? It has nothing to do. Most people have time to work out, right? If we're being completely honest, most people have time in their day to work out, and it's just they're not making the time for it, right? And at the end, at when you look at it from that perspective, and if you're honest with yourself, a lot of people aren't honest with themselves. If you just do something that makes you feel good, as opposed to feeling like you have to complete anything. Like if you just do what makes you feel good every day for 3 or 4 weeks, you're gonna make progress. You know what I mean? Even
Hmm.
if it's something simple where it's like push-ups and sit-ups, push-ups and pull-ups, you know, shoulder press, push-ups and ring rows, like whatever it is. If you were to tell me at the bare minimum you were doing 100 push-ups and 100 ring rows every single day, I'd be like, all right, maybe we add some air squats in there, maybe we add some sit up, like whatever it might be. If you do that every single day, at least you're doing something, right? And that's progress. And I think where a lot of people kind of miss out on is they're like, okay, well, like if I if how do I explain this? Like I'd rather see someone just go in and do something they like every single day than to just not go at all. Does that make sense? And I
Yeah,
think
I
that
think
like,
that's what people should do, especially because most people hate how they feel when they try to jam everything in 1 week.
well, and this is something I've kind of like, I think I've recommended so much over the last year to a lot of my clients and the people that I come in contact with is they're like, I've just kind of struggled. I'm just not enjoying the gym. It seems like a lot. And I'm like, well, okay, well, like, what do you like doing? Like, what do you like doing when you go in the gym? Like, oh, I really like this machine, or I like feeling this way, or I like the way I look when I do these exercises. Like, cool. Like, and again, I don't think there's anything wrong with any of it, right? I think there's bad ways to use fitness, but I just don't think for most people in today's world, I don't think there's a wrong way to work out as long as you're doing something, right? Obviously, if you want the best results, right? If you want the most efficient results and the best results and the quickest results, it's to go through like a full program where things are split up and you're giving your energy to the right pieces at the right times and the right places. But for the most part, if you were to just go in and do the six main movements, squat, hinge, push, pull, and single leg and core set, well, yeah, I don't. But you say seven, right? So I'll say seven. I miscounted there. But seven main movements, and you do that every single day, and you just do one movement for each, you're gonna make insane progress, even if it's the same movements every single day, right? So don't overthink it so much if you lose your schedule, as in like I got to get back into this and get back onto it. Like just figure out what's the easiest way for me to do those seven movements in a day for like 2 to 3 sets on each one, even if it's one big set on each one, whatever it is, just what's the best way I can get that into my day and attack it from there. And I think it's going to make people's lives so much easier.
Yeah, I think just the biggest thing is just set realistic goals. Like Brandon said, if you're going back for the first time in forever, don't overdo it every single day. Set a goal for yourself, like you said, micro sessions, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Every day, just a little bit of movement here and there. And again, if it's something that makes you happy that isn't the standard going to the gym, do that. Split it up with everything. And then obviously if there's something that if your goal is to just be healthier and you're not training for a specific purpose, anything is better than nothing, even
Yeah.
in a smaller increment. So it's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like I said, I think the biggest goal here just needs to be rhythm, right? And it needs to be this idea of like, how do I get into the best rhythm as quick as possible? And it's again, it's the same thing. It's momentum, right?
Mhm.
Because again, this is the best case scenario. It's like I have no injuries, I have no real limitations or sickness. It's literally just finding a way to fit this into my schedule. and that's just discipline, right? And that is just an idea of, again, whatever makes it easiest for you to get into the gym, just go do it. Don't
Yeah.
overthink that side of it, right? And then the last piece we have is injury. And I think for me, injury tends to be the tricky one, right? Because, we don't know. I don't want to recommend anything and put people in like harm here, but I feel from my own experience, right? Without any broken bones, without any torn ligaments, anything like that, movement is such a positive when you're injured. And I think even to the point where I would say like a rolled ankle or anything like this, like if you can move and you can continue to move in some way, shape, or form, you have to continue to move, right? I think one of the bigger injuries I've had, or the biggest injury I had, was my foot when I broke my foot, and I stopped moving for 3 months, right? And I think it slowed down the healing. It mentally put me in a bad place. And that was one of the positions where I was like, damn, I wish I just kept moving. I wish I just kept moving, kept moving, kept moving. And I think for most people, injury is, again, I'm not going to sit here and act as a doctor and be like, oh, just move and you're going to feel better, right? But I think in the same breath, if you can move, if you can find ways to move that don't bother the injury that you have, then I think you have to. You have to continue to find ways to move. And I think this kind of the same theme you're going to hear in the other pieces we've talked about today, which is don't do more than you can handle at the moment, right? If you hurt your hip, don't go deadlifting 1 rep max, right? But what I think you can find is that at some level of progression, right? Or regression, I should say, there's going to be something you can do that doesn't hurt, right? And you just have to be either willing to go find it or willing to ask someone to help you find it. And when you find that level of regression, that it's like, okay, if, and it kind of looks like this. If I can't, maybe I can't do a back squat, right? Or I do a back squat, I hurt something on my hip. It's like, okay, cool. So how does front squat feel? Front squat still feels a little bit iffy. I'm still feeling it in my back. Okay. How does a goblet squat feel? It feels better, a lot better. I think we're moving in the right direction, but I still feel a little bit. Okay, cool. How does a goblet squat to like a box or an elevation feel? Oh, actually, okay. This actually feels a lot better, cutting the range of motion in like half. It's like, okay, cool. So it's probably thoracic spine. There's probably some injury there or discomfort that's causing that. Cool. Now let's try to see how can we make this movement feel like we're feeling on like an actual squat, right? Because I think too many people they get hurt and they just kind of stop. They're just like, oh well, I'm hurt, everything, I can't do anything. And for the most part, there's a lot of stuff we can do if we just kind of take a step back and just look and be like, all right, what actually hurts and what movements can I actually do that don't bother it? And this is again, I don't want you guys to I tried what's the I gotta say, like, I'm not a medical doctor, right? So, you don't have to obviously take this with a pinch of salt. And I was listening to a TikTok yesterday. I have to send it to you. And they were talking about like old sayings like that.
Hmm.
And they were saying that the who was it? I think it was the Romans. They were saying believe that if you were poisoned and you put a pinch of salt, that it would stop the poison from working in your body.
I
So that
love hearing the origins of those old sayings.
yeah, it was really cool. But anyways, like take what I say with a pinch of salt. But I think in the same breath, I've had so much experience where I've been hurt, I've been injured, I've done things like whatever, and I keep moving or I just keep finding ways to move, and it seems like the injuries just get better quicker, right? And again, it's just one of those things where movement is always going to help, and I think there's a reason that movement always helps, and that we could talk about movement being um medicine, right? Like movement is medicine. And I think that if we really look at movement being medicine, it's this idea that like it helps the body heal, it helps the body feel better, it helps the body move in these directions. So it's important for us to continue to move in that direction. And I think that at the end of the day, if we're injured to the point that like we need surgery or something like that, it's a different story. And you want like an actual rehab process. But what I'll say is like for myself, I've learned so much from rehabbing myself on so many occasions by hurting myself and then having to fix it, seeing what actually feels good, seeing what I can do. And it's led me down a path of like, okay, I'm injured. Cool. Well, what can I do? What can I do? And then we kind of have the conversation from there. And I think that for me, that's kind of the way to go with it is like, if you can move, great, continue to move. Right. And I think if you're having trouble moving, figure out what can help you in that range of motion or just stay away from that bit for a little bit. Not like forever, right? But stay away from it for a little bit until it starts to feel better. And then we can move in that direction. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think the thing that I would add is if you are experiencing some type of injury that you're unsure on how to work around, because obviously you want to work around pain, not through it. Again, because movement is medicine, but only if you do it in the right way. Consult a professional. Again, we are not medical doctors, but we are professionals in our field. So consulting someone like Brandon or myself,
Hmm.
whether it's literally just DM us if you're hearing this and you're like, actually, I've been dealing with a shoulder thing. Send us a DM and we'll help you out. But doing that, if you're not sure what to do, reach out to someone who does know, and then they can give you proper advice. This way, you're not just stuck dealing with an injury where you're not progressing and you're actually losing a lot of your progress because you're doing nothing at all. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see is if someone hurts someone hurts something on one side of their body, they don't even work the other side. And if someone hurts something up top, they don't work below, and vice versa. So you could still move your body and get what you need out of movement as long as like you're not in pain. So don't stop all movement altogether. Or even if it's in your upper body, don't stop all upper body movement. You could do single arm stuff, single leg stuff if it's your lower body, and just move through ranges of motion that don't hurt.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too to kind of summarize this is like with with injury, right? We want to play it smart, but it's the same idea as if you're hurt, give yourself time to heal, right? Don't put yourself in a position where it's like, oh, I'm just here to train. Now, I think if you're an athlete or you have a competition, sometimes you have to push through that stuff, unfortunately, right? And you kind of have to have these little, especially like in the world that I'm in with like fighting, sometimes you're just hurt, and sometimes you just got to deal with it. And it's not like, or you pull out of the fight, it's up to you. But like, if you don't want to pull out of the fight, then you just got to, it's just something you have to deal with. So I think in regards to that, the more we can we can attack this with a game plan and allow ourselves to heal while also moving in the right direction. I think there's a common theme you're going to see with all three of these, which is like, don't go too much too soon, right? Be smart, be consistent, and help yourself feel better. Build a rhythm, get yourself in that moving in that direction. Let your body do what it needs to do, which is heal, recover, just find ways to feel better, right? And I think
Mhm.
with injury specifically, what happens is again, it's this vicious circle of like, I'm hurt. I do stuff. I feel a little bit better. I go 100% because I feel like I have to catch up. And then you're right back where you started, sometimes worse, right? Which I've done. And you kind of just keep running into this cycle until it's like, all right, now I'm just kind of stuck at this plateau or I'm stuck in this position where it's like, I just can't get better. There, my hip still bothers me. And then what happens is, and this is life, right? You get this injury and you move with it for say months and then you compensate and then you start to have other problems and other issues that come up and the only thing you needed to do was take 2 weeks off, right, or take 2 weeks of a back step to not save yourself or to save yourself 3 to 4 months of actual like injury and pain that takes away from your full training cycle, right? And I think that's the biggest thing to take away from this at the end of this podcast, right, because we can wrap it up here soon, is be smart, build momentum, feel good, and put yourself in a position where at the end of the day, you did better for yourself during these times, right? When you're sick, make sure you're not taking away from your immune system. Support it, right? We know fitness is healthy for us, but we also know if we push too much, there is a compromisation of our immune system at a certain point from training. We don't want to do that if we're feeling ill, right? We don't want to do that if we're feeling like we're going to have a cold coming on. If we know we're like, ugh, I kind of feel a little bit sick, dial back just a little bit, pull back just a little bit, get to that point, and that changes, right? Like if you're at a certain fitness level, right? Like, a certain workout isn't going to compromise your immune system. If you're at a fitness level that you're like, okay, well, I just started training again at a high level. Yeah, I mean, maybe we want to be smarter about the level that we push ourselves to, but this is where awareness starts to come in, and where us understanding that level of where we're at and how we're gonna kind of navigate this stuff works. And I think the other main thing here for sickness is hydrate and eat, right? Don't forget those two. Schedule wise, it's just building rhythm and getting ourselves back into the momentum of saying, I need to do this as much as possible and make this a part of my schedule, right? Don't do anything that's going to stop you from going for days. Be smart about the way you progress things. Don't do a workout that's going to make you not be able to work out for 2 or 3 days. Think longer term here. If you have 2 to 3 weeks of solid workouts at 70% effort, that make sure you're fitting it in and you're enjoying it and you're actually having fun and looking forward to it, that's going to do so much more for your fitness in the short term than trying to make up for missing weeks of training, right? And then last but not least, injury. If you are dealing with an injury, obviously, if it's something that seems severe or like, if you have a bone sticking out of your skin, probably go get it checked, right?
Yeah,
It's
you
not
might
really
want to
an
get that looked at.
exercise. There's not an exercise to fix that one. But if we're dealing with a strain or some type of, we will say like lower level injury, move, right? Don't go into your normal workouts. Don't go lifting 90% loads or 1 rep maxes and whatnot. But be smart, find ways to move, do some research and kind of see what hurts, what doesn't hurt, what causes pain, what doesn't cause pain. Because there's going to be a lot of things that you weren't expecting that be able to do pain free that you're going to be able to do, right? And if you execute on those three, then when you have these issues, you're going to have a game plan, right? And it's going to feel a lot better to take days off. It's going to feel a lot better to get sick, right? There's not going to be so much stress on it because one, you're not going to lose everything. Even if you were to take a month off, you still wouldn't lose everything. Yeah, it would be like, yeah, I don't feel like I did a month ago. Like it doesn't, it's not the point. It's like, hey, if you do everything you need to be doing now, right? And you build true fitness. And this is another thing too, if you train this way now and you take the advice we're kind of talking about with all three of these, and then once you get better, you use the advice that we talk about consistently on the podcast and our YouTube channel, you're not going to have injuries. You're not going to have things you have to worry about. Sickness is one thing or another. We don't know where you guys are putting your mouths, right? But, but it's one of those things where you can't really control the sickness, but everything else you can control. And if you do things on a regular basis, consistently, efficiently, effectively, with good rhythm, good motivation, good energy, you're going to be able to do this stuff forever and you're not going to deal with anything. For me personally, I've changed my philosophy so much in the last 3 years of training, and the injuries have been the least amount of injuries I've ever had, right? I've been okay with dialing it back a little bit. I've been okay with not going 100% every single session. I know when I start to feel that, this probably doesn't feel good. There's movements that I do now or that I haven't done in years because I'm like, I don't see the risk reward benefit of me doing it. Not saying that there's bad movements. It's just like for me, I've only done this movement and I've only reached to a certain point, and it's like I can change that and get that same stimulus from a different exercise or training plan, right? So for me, it's like I've gone through this kind of 10-year training plan that I was on of learning and experimenting, and I figured out what works for me and what works best. And now it's just kind of executing on the things that I know make me feel good and the weight and set ranges that make me feel good. And I don't overthink everything. I don't say like, oh, I need to be, innovating this because it needs to be. It's like it works. It makes me feel good. I don't get injured. I'm able to perform. I'm able to do the things that I want to do. And that makes me happy at the end of the day. And I look forward to my training every single day. So it's like that's where people need to be, right? They don't need to be, oh, I'm dreading this because I have to do 90%, like Texas squat method. It's like cool, like that's great if you want to improve your squat, but for the average person, just do a goblet squat. Like there's really nothing at the end of the day that no one's gonna sit there and be like, oh, you did goblet squat instead of a back squat, like that stinks. And it's like, no, like just do what makes you feel good, makes you feel excited, and everything, all the three topics that we talked about today, they're going to easily kind of weave in and everything's going to be fine. And you're not eventually going to have to deal with them less and less. And that's the goal, is to deal with injury less and less, to deal with sickness less and less, to deal with losing schedule less and less. Um, yeah, I just went on a long tangent there, but anything to add to that?
That was the perfect recap. Every single point that we made, it was just I didn't even want to like interrupt. It was just
Uh,
beautiful. Yeah.
we're getting there.
Just and the biggest thing too, I guess if I could add one more thing,
So
is
you just said
all
you
the
didn't.
advice we're giving you. What, pardon? What'd you say?
I said I thought you said you didn't have to add anything.
I was gonna say, yeah. The one thing I would add is know you. So like obviously Brandon's methods and my methods, we're giving you what we've learned over a very long period of time collectively between us. And we know what works for us and what's worked for our clients. But if you find that you have a specific method that works for you for returning back to things and it works every time, you can even share it with us, but absolutely do you. Like if you know your body, you know your body and you know it better than anyone else.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point. I think that's a conversation for a different episode because I think that like this is where that idea of like principles and methods come in. Methods, I think, and if we can define that quickly, like methods are something that change, right? Methods are things that, maybe the style of the workout changes. Maybe you do high rocks, maybe you do triathlon, maybe you do bodybuilding, maybe you do powerlifting, whatever it is, CrossFit. Like that changes, right? The modality changes, but principles are those that which doesn't matter what element or modality of fitness you're competing in or completing, you take those same things with you into each and every single one of them. And I think that for most of this stuff, like Jerry said, if you have methods that work, that's great, right? Whatever it is, that's fine. But I think the principles stand the same of each of everything that we talked about today. Those are principles, right? Those are no matter if you're sick, no matter if you're hurt, no matter if you're running, schedules running crazy, or it's like me where it's like we randomly travel to places as we kind of go and get ready for Ian's fights. I think that like all of this stuff these are principles. These are things that no matter where we are, I take with me and I handle on a daily basis. So I think it's the same thing for you. Take those principles, attack the principles, use them the best way that you see fit, and put them inside of the methods that work best for you, and you're gonna be soaring.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Cool. Went a little bit over 45 today.
Well,
Um,
15 over. Never heard anybody.
you know what I'm saying? So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode today. Again, Jerry's back. He's feeling good.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
feeling good. You know what it is. You know who it is. We're back. We will see you guys next week.